Thanks everybody for joining us here tonight. I've been collecting the maple leaf issue now for 40 some years, I guess, with a little hiatus in the middle. And I've been exhibiting it nationally since 2010 and internationally since 2015. So it's a great, I find it a very interesting and great issue to collect. And what I'd like to do tonight basically is to try to show you some new things that we found research and with Garfield Porter's help with the Green Foundation using the D6000. And I'm hoping that nothing that I'm going to show here tonight is old news to you. I hope that everything I can show you tonight is going to be new. And if not, there's maybe one or two things that are not 100% new, but I hope I can provide you with some new information on it. So I'd like to maybe just start with get into the slides. It was the first issue after the American Banknote Company won the award for to build a new plant and to be the new printer for the Canada Post back in 1897. What you see on the screen there now is the master die that was done for the issue. That's a very early rendition of a stamp die. It's the earliest rendition of a stamp die in Canadian philately that I know. So it's the earliest stage, I should say. So the vignette, which is the Queen's portrait there, was the part that was engraved by Charles Skinner at the American Banknote Company in New York. And he used a portrait that was taken by royal photographers W.D. Downey as his guide. And my belief is basically this proof here that you see and the one that you'll see next are what I would call letter engravers proofs, right? They're not done on India paper, they're done on it's just done on cardboard. But it's really just to show the lettering that was done after Skinner had finished his vignette. So the letter engraver would have put the Canada Post and that top arc on at that stage. Once this was done, the master die would have been hardened, and a transfer roller would have been made, and then it would be transferred to the 8 denominations and the 3 unissued essays, which you'll see in a minute. So this is the denomination die, what a denomination die would look like. And again, I think this is a letter engraver's proof as well, because the letter engraver at this time would have had to put on the bottom half of the arc with the lettering half cent. It would have been done for every other of the issues as well, but this is the only one where there's a proof known of it. And they did a few other things. They strengthened the frame lines a bit, but I'm not sure whether that was done at this stage or whether it was done previously after that proof had been taken. From this, there were 11 dies produced. F102, which you see here, is the half cent. And then there was one for the 1 cent, 2 cent, 3 cent, 5 cent, 6 cent, 8 cent, and 10 cent. Those were the issued stamps. There was also dies done for a 15 cent, a 20 cent, and a 50 cent. Right? And those were the high values that were served previously by the 15 cent large queen, and by the 20 cent and 50 cent widow weeds of the small queen era. So this next thing is really looking at the spandrel lines, because after the initial work was done, spandrel lines are basically the main thing that still had to be done to complete the die. When these dies were made, they became a work of a lot of different people. So Skinner did the vignette, letter engraver would do the engraving, and then the spandrel lines would be put in by another person. I'm not sure where, but in these types of things, the there's also different techniques that were used, right? So it's not all engraving. There was some etching done as well. And if you look at this little diagram, I think it's from the 6 cent black die proof that I've got, or black progressive die proof, today. You'll see all these little lines, and they show up here in the ovals, okay, in the outer oval frame. They show up in the outer rectangular frame, and they show up going through the leaves. Right? So what would have been done to do these by etching is that the whole die would have been covered with a what they call a ground, which is an acid-resistant material, and then they would have taken an etching pen, more like an X-Acto knife maybe, and cut through where they wanted the lines to be. They would have had to go back and repair some of it because they overshot the lines as well into the white oval and the white outer frame and the leaf as well. So they would fix that up, and then they would put it into an acid bath for some period of time, and the acid would have eaten away at the steel and created a line. So I don't think that these were 100% etched, but I think they were started with an etching process. Started so much that the engraver could come in afterwards and be able to make a nice, clean, straight line with his engraving tool. So these are the unissued essays. Like I said before, there was the 15, 20, and 50 cent. There's no break in the die number. So it starts at was F2, and it continued on until F112. And the first die of the numeral issues was F113. So there's no break in the numbers. So we know that there's no other unknown essays or for unissued values available. So, in doing some of the research, basically, one of the basic areas to start with is the contract, right? So the contract between the post office and the American Banking Company. It required all of the work from the hardening of the dies onwards had to be done in the Ottawa plant. It didn't say that they couldn't make the dies in Ottawa, but all the work after the hardening of the dies had to be done in Ottawa. So the expertise to do the dies was certainly in New York, and that's where the dies were prepared. The plates, the first 7 values from the half cent to the 8 cent were all laid out on plates of 200 subjects, 10 high and 20 wide. The 10 cent plate was done on a smaller plate, 10 high by 10. The plates were always unhardened flat plates, and the contract required 35,000 impressions of the plate before the requiring replacement. So 35,000 impressions times 200 subject per plate is 7 million stamps that would have to be used. The plate would have to be suitable for. And really, we had one plate for most of the issues, or most of the values. We had 4 plates for the 2 cent, 4 plates for the 1 cent, and 6 plates for the 3 cent. So the only 2 that really kind of went over that 35,000 impressions was the 1 cent, which was, I think that was 34 million they produced. So those 4 plates went over by quite a bit. They went over 28,000 would be the number of impressions, number of stamps that they were. 28 million would be the number of stamps that they should have been able to produce. They produced 34, and for the 6 cent it was 42 million, and they produced 44 million on that. The rest of them were well under the date, the number that they're required to have. So the other thing on the order book indicated that the American Banknote Company was to perforate and separate the printed sheets into 200 into panes of 100. So what was delivered to the post office was panes of 100 Printed on sheets of 200, delivered in panes of 100. On the first delivery in November 5th of 1897, something went awry. Meikles had reported that collectors were buying up the stocks of the previous issues and creating a shortage, which was really forcing the Maple Leaf issue to be rushed. And we see evidence of that in the small queen issue. You have 1 cent bisects that were used on the railway news in New Brunswick because the postmaster couldn't get any half-cent stamps for the newspaper rate. So on that first delivery of November 5th, there were 250 sheets that were delivered. That's 500 panes, 250 left, 250 right. And when they arrived, they weren't separated by perforations, they were separated by a guillotine. And then they were perforated afterwards. So the post office said that that's not the way we wanted it, but they needed the stamps, so they kept them. But they were instructed to go back and to rework the die to change the imprint. So they had an imprint on each pane and to make sure that the stamps were perforated and separated with the perforations. So that really gives us 500 panes with 10 straight edge stamps, right? So 5,000 stamps were at a straight edge. And that creates the first little unique philatelic issue for this, because Jamie Goff, he's an RDP and a collector and exhibitor in the United States. He's put together a factor for predicting the number of surviving covers that would be available from any issue. And there's some caveats to it. Basically, it is only valid up till the about 1911 issues, and it's only for the main values, not the real high values of any particular issue. But this fits all the caveats that he put onto his factor. And his factor basically is 8 to 12 basis points times the number of stamps that were available. And that would provide you with 4 to 6 surviving covers. It took me probably 15 to 20 years to find one. Now I know there are 5 that are known. I have 4 of them, and a fellow in Vancouver has the 5th one. There may be others out there, but once I found one, they started to come in over the last few years, etc. So, first one that I found was at New York, 2016. So it's in the last 7 years I found 4 of them. The frames for most of the issues, most of the values, had to be recut, right? They were not felt to be strong enough. They wanted them darker. They wanted them to hold ink and be a good frame for the stamp. So the recutting was done in Ottawa on the plate after the plate was all laid down, and you can find evidence throughout the half-cent plate and other plates as well of recutting. And this one here that you see on the picture there basically is the 29th stamp on the right pane. And there's another one just above it at the 19th stamp on the right pane. So that's the tool mark that's been extended beyond the frame as they were doing the recutting. Fresh entries, you can find a lot of fresh entries in the Maple Leaf plates. You won't find many re-entries, but the fresh entries are corrections that were made on the plate as the plate was being laid down. Okay? So the cinerographer who was doing the laying down of the plate would check after he'd just started to make sure that his image was coming in and not, too high, too low, or askew. And if he did find that it was too high or too low, he'd just simply make an adjustment and just roll the rest of the image in over top. So on this one here, this is the first position on plate number 1. It originally went in, it was a bit a bit to the left and down a bit. And you can see the markings at the bottom. The original mark was there. You can see it through the letters, and you can even see it on the Queen's cheek. Some of the doubling there. That's that. So that's right off the proof side, and you can find quite a few of those, but not a lot of re-entries. There are some exceptions. We'll go over those in a minute. The re-entries on the 1 cent. 1 cent is basically the half cent is basically an outlier, right? Most of the re-entries that you'll find are on the 1 cent and the 3 cent, which were the ones with the high volumes, and you got up near that, or get up over that 35,000 impressions. So they would have been re-entered a bit more, but the half cent was poorly done, right? So even though there was only 2 million stamps made from it, there was a lot of re-entries, right? So there's 4 states of the half cent that are available. State 1 is basically only 250 impressions, and that's with the imprint in the middle and the straight edge where it was guillotine cut. State 2 is exactly the same stamps. But in this case, basically now you've got 2 imprints and you've got the panes separated by perforations. There's about 3,750 impressions of that. State 3 was a re-entry. Okay, so they re-entered the plate a number of different positions on state 3, but there was only 1,000 impressions made from that. Ken Kershaw had the only pane of state 3, and I was able to buy that from a number of years back, so I now have the only pane of state 3. State 4 was state 3 re-entered again. There were 3 separate orders placed for stamps, and this was re-entered before the 3rd order, and all of the 4th order was, 3rd order was done with state 4, so it's the most common. So. And Ken Kershaw's book is referenced there if anybody's interested in more detailed information. It's a 2-volume book. He goes through the plating of all the states and all the positions on the stamps. So here's a case on the half set with the original fresh entry on the left, and then you'll see it with a state 4 re-entry on the right hand side. So this is one of the few situations where you're going to get a fresh entry and then later on a re-entry. So after each denomination here, I'm just going to show you a couple of items on rates. This happens to be another area that I collect, the box holder rate, and it came in 1889, and it was just a simple 2-line item under the 3rd class section of the postal guide, and it said unaddressed circulars, handbills, etc. may be posted for letterbox distribution at the rate of half cent each, to be prepaid by postage stamp. So the early ones of these are very, very difficult to find. Well, not so much in the small queens and numerals, but certainly in the leaf. I've only got a couple of them, but I haven't seen many more as well. So, so again, this is just a postcard. There's no date on the stamp because it was 3rd class mail. And all they needed was an obliterator, so it's a hubless flag castle that they're using for it. And then you also find with the half cent that people just love to put multiples as much as they can. This is a registered UPU letter to British Guyana, and they've got a block of 10 on the back for the postage, right? So 5 cents for the UPU rate and 5 cents for the registration. When we get to the half cents, we got a couple of die pictures here. There were 2 states to the in the die proofs, right? On the right, sorry, on the left, you've got the state 1, and you'll notice that it's got New York in the name of it. And on state two, it goes to Ottawa. And only the 1 cent and the 2 cents have New York on them. All the rest of them had Ottawa to start with. The other thing you'll notice is this little hole at the top. And that's really a hole that was put in the die at the time that the die was being hardened. So when they hardened the die, they heated it up, and they needed a means of transferring that dye, hot dye, and quenching it, right? So they put that hole in there, and before they heated the dye, they would put a wire through there so that they could pull that dye out of the hardening furnace and quench it quickly. One of the things that, and I'm not a printer, and I have no knowledge of this, but I have read a number of places basically that the printers are would like to make their proofs off of the unhardened dye because once the dye was hardened, it was tough to get all of the ink wiped off the die. And you can see at the top of this here, little greenish mark, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what they're talking about. Even though they wiped it well, it still kind of hangs and sticks to the dye, and it makes it a little bit messier proof. So this is kind of something I got involved with a few years back. On my early collecting, what I was looking for a lot was the plate strips. I was trying to get all the plate strips and vertical wove and plate strips and horizontal wove. And I came across this, where you've got a broken E on position 4, plate 4, right side, position number 6. And I never quite understood what caused that. It wasn't the re-entry, and it was not a hardened plate, so it wouldn't be a crack. But I got the opportunity a number of years back to go to the archives and look at their plate proof collection. They have all of the plates available from the well, I guess originally from the Postal Museum, and that showed me a lot, right? It showed me basically that the plates 3 and plates 4, the right-hand oval between the E of postage and the T, I guess it is, of cents, were all recut. And it was done by 2 different people as well, because the the plate 3 was done with diagonally crosshatched lines on all 200 subjects, right? Just the right-hand side, not the left-hand side. And on plate number 4, it was done differently. It was done with vertical lines on all 200 subjects. So what we see here basically with this broken E is actually one of those lines that kind of got away from the guy, and it extended into the bottom part of the E. There's another position number 18, where it extends into this white inner frame down here. I haven't got it on the proof, but I've got it on a stamp that I found as well. So here, basically on the left-hand side, is the reason why they wanted to do that recutting. The pill at that point, when it was come off the die, is all horizontal lines, right? And you can see as you go down there in this area, there's a lot of white spots there between the lines. And as the plate would wear, those white spots would become larger because the lines are V-shaped. So as the plate wears off, the distance the top of it wears off, it'll become more white spots available. So that's why they wanted to do it. And you see here, and I think you maybe see this as well, there's a line there, there's a line here, there's another line this way. So it's very interesting what they did with it. The next thing I noticed was that there's a couple of mystery lines that show up, not on all of the dies, but on some of the dies, right? And here you have the 1 set, and you'll see that there's one, two, and a bit of a third one here. Very shallow lines that are vertical. And I didn't know what they were at first. I was just calling them accent lines to begin with. But I realized what they were actually was probably wear bars, right? So a means of telling them basically how much the plate was wearing, right? And I have a plate, a partial plate of the 3 cent stamps. So I should say the 1 cent, plate three. And you look at that sheet, basically, those bars have disappeared pretty much, right? You don't see them, right? So that's exactly what they were. They were wear bars to gauge how much that plate was wearing over time. On the 1 cent, you're going to get a lot of fresh entries. Well, I should say a lot. There's three that I know of right off the bat, and the one on the left is plate number 3, and it's the left side, number 9, and the one on the right is number 89. And if you look at them at the top section here, that's the first line that would have went down, the highest point of the relief that was being rolled in, and that's why how the stenographer would know that he's off, because you can look at that compared to the other ones, and he can see that he needs to bring that down a little bit. You'll also find lines here in the body of it. So I'm going to show you that a little bit later. You can see kind of what why those are happening like that. This line here is just a plate scratch. I think it's not nothing to do with the fresh entry. So I come back now to the 1 cent dies, right? And as I showed you on the plates 1 and 2, the horizontal lines is what's on the state 1, right? And that's how the image got transferred to the plate, all 4 plates initially. And plates 3 and plates 4 were recut. Okay? But if you look at this one here, which is the second state of the die, it's got something totally different. It's got diagonal lines, right? So what has happened here basically is that after the rollers were made and the plates were laid down, and they realized they had this bit of a problem, they would have sent that die back to New York. So the die would have been annealed or softened, and then the old image hammered out, and new lines, diagonal lines, would have been put in, and then it would be sent back to Ottawa. And they would have done that because basically they were expecting that later on they were going to have to produce more plates, and they didn't want to have to do the recutting of the plate again. So, 1 cent usage as well. This one on the left, I've always liked. It's got some God kind of looking down on the left-hand side, and then they've positioned the 2 1 cent Queen Victoria stamps to look in the same direction. The one on the right is a Alpha Chemical Company in Berlin, which is now Kitchener. Very colorful, and very pleased to get this a few years back. The 1 cent was used for a lot of printed matter and different types of things. So the one on the left is a pamphlet, a religious pamphlet. Then you've got typewriters being advertised. So that would have been some sort of a circular or printed matter in an envelope. And the next one here is one that I like as well. This is actually 18 by 30 inch, 18 by 20 inch broadsheet ad for a farm auction in Grimsby in the Niagara area. So we move on to the 2 cent now. This is the plate proof. First three rows of the left hand side of plate number 1. And quite often when you find fresh entries, you'll find other ones in the same area. It happens here on the 2 cent, it happens on the 6 cent. So this one has fresh entries at positions number 1, 2, 7 and 8, 11 and 21. This is position number 21 with the fresh entries in it. And you can see here basically the 2 marks here. They would have been the original marks where the top of the image was, right? And you can see the bottom of the image was down here. So those would have been the high points on the relief, right? So very quickly the cinematographer could see that he was off from the rest of the stamps. It's important for him to stay in line because if you're off of one stamp, when you do the perforations, your perforations are way off stuff. So, and he was a bit to the left as well. I blew this up as well over here, the 2 cent, because you can see a line around here in an O shape. Now it's not perfect to the O of 2, but it was the initial, kind of location cuts that they made for the O. Okay, and they would have done the same for the W and the same for the T. And they're bigger because they wanted to get the positioning laid out first and on the die, and then they would cut away and make a nice round around 0 in the word 2. So it's a lot of different things that you can find once you start to study it a bit. So another aspect about the 2 cent stamp as well is that some of the stamps were stamp runs, or printing runs, I guess you'd call them, were done with aniline ink. So aniline ink is a coal tar based water soluble ink, and it soaks very, very far into the stamp. In my exhibit, I've got one where I actually show the back of the stamp. You can see the image quite clearly at the back of the stamp, right? So the best way for me to try to show these was to show a wreck cover. Okay, so the wreck of the SS Labrador happened in 1899, just off the coast of the Hebrides, and these 2 covers come from that wreck. So the one on the left, the image that's on the paper is the actual stamp image that was on that cover. So the ink is soaked through the stamp and has resided itself on the cover. On the one on the left, you're seeing the mirror image, because what's happened there is that the image is from the stamp that was on the cover adjacent to it, and that has ran into that paper. So this there's 2 different rec covers that show that quite clearly. There's only they had 157 bags of mail, I think it was 157 something. Only 7 bags were ever found after the wreck, and of those 7 bags, there's only 12 covers that are accounted for, and there's only 3 with a maple leaf image or stamp on it, and these are 2 of those 3. So another really nice usage for the 2 cent is the soldier and seaman's rig. So that was introduced in 1795, and allowed letters to and from soldiers and seamen to be sent within the British Empire at 1 penny or 2 cents Canadian. So this is from a chief carpenter on HMS Rambler, which was a survey ship that was surveying the strait of Belle-Isle between Labrador and Newfoundland, and it's back to England. There's 4 of these known. 2 of them are addressed to the same person, and he would have had that mailed when he was in Halifax. The SS Rambler later on became involved in the Boer War, and I think it sank someplace at some point as well. So, a couple of other usages on the left is the free carrier delivery. So there was 14 cities in Canada that in 1898 had free carrier delivery, and they were like Montreal, Toronto, Ottawa, Kingston, London, etc. And then the other one on the right is domestic and U.S. So letter rate was reduced to 2 cents on January 1, 1899. And so this is a new conceptual patriotic envelope with that on it. So we move into the 3 cent. On the 3 cent, there were 2 plate states, right? And you can see them on the plate proofs quite easily. The state number 1, the lines were nearly vertical, right? So so that whole oval area fill was pretty well vertical lines. On state number 2, it was diagonal lines, right? Similar to what the engraving was on the 1 cent after it had been gone back to New York. Right? So what happened here then basically is they made a transfer roll 100 from the original die. Once they had done that, they laid down plates 1 and 2. This time, instead of reworking the plate, they sent the die back to New York, right? And they re-engraved it, sent it back, and then they did a new transfer roll number 107, and 107 was used to lay down the last 4 plates, 3 through 6. Right? So that's the only time that this happened in the Maple Leaf issue, and I'm not 100% sure why, but it's an outlier for everything else that has happened. So here's the image of the proofs. I call the first one state 0 because no plates were made out of it. But you can see the vertical lines there. You can see that the border or the frame is still very, very shallow, not very deep. State 1, there's no proof known of state 1, but we know exactly what it would look like because it would look exactly like the plate because vertical fill lines would be there, the same as they are here. And this irregular line in the frame kind of weaves its way up there, was put on at some point, and that would be in that die proof. But there's no die that I found yet for state number 1 exactly. And then state number 2 die is what came back from New York. And it was used again for plates 3 to 6. And then we've got some rates here again. The domestic letter rate was the workhorse. 3 cent stamp was a workhorse for that rate. That rate lasted until December 31st, 1898. And then here's another one, the bulk newspaper rate for at 1 cent per pound. And they used 15 pounds, they used 5 3 cent stamp. After January 1st, 1899, when the Imperial Penny Post came in, allowing letters to be sent at 1p or 2 cents per half ounce between different countries in the British Empire. Not all of them, but most of them. Now there was no need for the 3 cent stamp. Right? So because they reduced the domestic rate accordingly. In fact, there was a period between December 25th when that rate came in and January 1st when the domestic rate was done. It would be cheaper to send a letter to England than it was to send it down the road to the next town for a period of about 6 or 7 days. The Post Office Department in early 1899 accepted returns of 3 cent pains from the local post offices and from the public. And then they used the stock that they had of 3 cent stamps and also the return pains, and they overprinted them 2 cents. And that was the first overprint in Canada. There were other overprints before that in some of the provinces, but that was the first one in Canada. And this block here I'm showing is a nice block of 20, I think it is. And between rows, columns 3 and 4, between columns 7 and 8, the spacing is different between the sets, the two overprints. This is called the narrow spacing. This is the regular spacing over here. And the other thing that's interesting about this is that when this was a 3-cent stamp and had been printed, there was a fold in the paper. And so you've got this nice offset on the front of the stamp. Well, so all the way up the side through the selvages. And here's a few rates for that. First one is just your standard letter rate. The one down here is a 3-cent letter card that was being sent to Haiti, and when it went to the post office, it didn't have the stamp on it, so they marked it as T10, which was for 10 centimes or 2 cents deficiency, but they didn't send it on. They just waited till the guy came back to the post office to pick up his mail. They said, "Hey, you need to put another 2-cent stamp on here," and they did, and they stamped it with a different hammer than this one is, and sent it on its way. But they should have actually stroked that out as well, but they didn't. They did another. In the 5-cent, the post office order book required that the 5-cent be printed on blue paper. Okay. I'm not 100% sure why, but there are other situations where stamps in other countries were printed on blue paper. But anyways, for our purposes here, all we're looking at is some experimentation that we've done to try to figure out kind of how they would do it with blue paper. So you've got, this was the first one that I had been years ago. It's a very dark blue paper, and with the blue stamp on it. The other ones I've got more recently, this is actually a violet stamp, a lighter blue paper, another violet stamp on a even paler paper, and then a blue stamp on a kind of more of a blue tinged paper. So they tried these different things to see kind of what fit, and eventually the paper was purchased as a blue opaline paper from New York. And I'm still trying to find out kind of what the word opaline is supposed to mean in this context, but it's always been called blue opaline paper from New York. So here's a few 5-cent usages. The one on the right is a nice cover from Victoria. You don't get many advertising covers in this era, so I'm really pleased to get this one. And the other thing about this cover as well is I think, you try to figure out kind of why would somebody from Sweden be in Victoria, and this is 1898. Okay, so 50,000 miners came into the Yukon in 1898 after the Klondike gold strike, and some of them, as you'll see later on, went over the Kilcook Pass. Other ones went up by steamer and went up the Yukon River. And this may be one person that was going through Victoria and going up the steamer, the Yukon River as well. In 1898, we could have a postcard or private postcard with a illustration on the address side in Canada, United States, but the UPU didn't accept them, so they couldn't go by the 2-cent UPU postcard rate. They had to go by the first class letter rate. Okay? So this one was being sent to Hungary from Montreal, and when it got to London, this is one of Kent Nelson's specialties, the UK tax marks with the L for London. When it got to London, they said illustration, hit it with a tax mark. And then they realized that they had a 5-cent stamp on it. This was first class. So they had to stroke all that out and send it ahead. So there's a couple of nice little usages for that. This is a stamp you've probably seen or heard about. It's the 6-cent engraver slip, right? And it is the most significant and the most famous engraver slip in all of Canadian philately. It's on position number 1L14. If you read Boggs or you read Jared, I'm not sure which one it is. They've got that kind of mixed up with another mark on the 5-cent. They don't have the right position, but it is 1L, plate 1, left side, left pane, position number 14. So there's been a number of is well known that type of thing, but what has not been identified yet is how many of these are used. It's not identified in different published articles or handbooks or catalogs. In fact, the latest edition of the Unitrade catalog that I have, it just says basically corrected later. But the number actually is 125. The way I found this out basically was to get the post office delivery records, how many, I guess, A, B, and C delivery records on the post office order book. And the first tranche of deliveries was made on November 22nd, right? And it was for 250 panes, which half would be right, half would be left. Right? And after the half-cent error was discovered, just a few weeks before that, and in general, in those days, basically, there wasn't a lot of quality control, but more incoming inspection than actual quality control of the process. So that would have been thoroughly inspected. That would have been caught. That was all quite obvious. The second reason that I say it's 125 is that the second tranche of deliveries was 950 panes, right? Which would mean total received by the post office at that time would be 1,200 panes, of which half would have this on it. And there is no way with the auction frequency, it just does not support a quantity of 600. So the 125 is definitely the number for that. And anecdotally, I've been collecting this issue for over 40 years, and again with a little bit of a hiatus, but I've been able to accumulate one used, one mint, and one on plate strip. So it's you just don't see them that often. The other way that you can identify plate recuts is with ink streaks, right? And the 6-cent showed you that quite vividly. There's a lot of these. I shouldn't say a lot. I mean, I watch for them, so I see them. But there's vertical ink streaks that you can find on from the frame line corners vertically, which are indicative of the frame line recutting. So what would happen there basically is the semi-dry ink in the deeper frame lines now, it would streak when they were taking the sheet off the press, stacking it, right? And that's why they're always in the vertical direction, because it was one kind of motion that they did to do that. So you can find these with streaks from any of the four corners, and sometimes you can find them with streaks from 2 or 3 of the corners on the same stamp. In this case, in the center, you've got 2 streaks from adjacent stamps on a block. The other thing you'll find, the other thing I found, basically on the 6-cent, are the trade samples. Right? So these we know are trade samples because they're not off the die. They don't have. When you want to find out if it's not really from the same die, you don't look at this. You look outside the die, right, to see if there's any other. And there's always some little random markings and stuff like that in this area here. Well, the random markings that are on these, can't see on this level, but are totally different than what you would find on the die itself, or on the die proof itself. So these were not made from the dies. They're likely made from well, they would be made from a new die that was prepared for the transfer wars. And we don't know when they would have been done. The dies were destroyed in 1911, but the transfer rolls were not destroyed until 1925. So these could have been made anywhere up to about 1925. And there's one in carmine, and I don't know of any other colors. And these ones here are from the Lindemann collections and the Jarrett collection. So 6-cent usages. The main usage for the 6-cent was a double weight for a letter. Also, the registered drop letter is a usage for a single 6-cent stamp. The ones I'm showing here are basically a double weight letter and a quadruple. Now again, the 8-cent, and again we're back recutting the plate. And this time we're not recutting the whole inner section of that oval frame. We're only recutting the bottom half of it. And if you recall back, we're looking at what that looked like on the 1-cent previous to being recut. That's where all the white space was, with the bottom half, bottom 60% of that area. So this time, basically, they went back and they just recut the bottom part. And again, it was the right side, and they did it on all 200 subjects. A few small fresh entries here on position number 10 and position number 69 on the right side. I don't know if I mentioned before, but on the plate proofs and the imperforates of these issues and other issues as well, they're not rare, but positional spots on both are quite rare. So this is a positional spot of our 1R9 and 10, which has the fresh entry. This is the positional spot on our 69, which has the fresh entry. These basically are each one of 2 available. And we know that from the number of actual sheets of imperforate stamps that are available. Some of the usages for the 8-cent, the one on the left is the standard usage of a registered letter. And it's at the Massey Harris company, and it's shows some of their spare parts that's basically a knife or a paymore, which broke all the time and to be replaced. And the other one is a double weight registered in combination with a 3-cent stamp. This cover is a bit ratty. It's done in kind of blue pencil and it's a little bit cut down, etc. But the story behind it I find quite interesting. I mentioned earlier on there were 50,000 miners that came into the Yukon in 1898. And to get there, they had to go over what they call the Chillicothe Pass. Right? And the picture on your right there shows what they call the Golden Stairs, right? So they cut steps into the ice all the way up that mountain. And they all had to go up that to get in there. And the government required them to bring 1,000 pounds of supplies with them. So you can see that they're carrying packs up there. They would have had to do that trip maybe 10, 15, maybe 20 times to get that 1,000 pounds up there. And you can see the guy at the bottom here with a little sled he's carrying all the way up there as well too. So it's quite. I find it quite interesting to have a cover that would have come over that pass, coming out of Dawson up until October 1898. The Northwest Mounted Police ran the post office. This was in this cover is from August of 1898, and the Northwest Mounted Police operated the post office, and they carried the mail to and from Dia or Skagway in Alaska. It's a very, very famous photograph. It's fortunately it's in the public domain now, so it really gives you an impression of This is 1,000 feet elevation difference in the last half. And the last thing, basically on the 10 cent, there's not a lot more to tell you on the 10 cent, but what I wanted to show you here basically is that they use what was called the intersecting arc method of laying the plate out. So there's a book that Peter Spencer, the BNAS book that Peter Spencer put out on the numerals, which he details the arc method. So it was just another way of laying the plate out, and you can see the lines, the arcs that were still in the red circles there. The 5 cent was also laid out that way. Now, most of those would be polished off afterwards, but this is position number 100. And number 100 has it, 99 has it, and a few other positions as well. But this is probably the greatest one in position number 100. 10 cent usages. There are a few solo usages. This is basically a triple weight registered with a 1 cent and a 3 cent. And this one I bought a few years back. It's a sextuple rate the UPU. When I bought it, it had a 3 cent stamp that somebody stuck on there, so they'd have all the stamps to the issue. I had to have that removed. It just didn't belong on there. It had a roller cancel on it, sure. But there's your 10 cent. It's got the 2 cent, the half cent, the 1 cent, 2 cent, 5 cents, 6 cent, 8 cent, 10 cent, and on a 2 cent pre-stamped envelope. So the last portion here I talk about is what were called the 3 cent progressive die books. Right? And Minius and Pratt, who were the editors of the Essays and Proofs Journal, and also from the Essays and Proofs Journal, they made the B&A Essays and Proofs book. Right? They have 5 listed. Right? The other 2, one is described as basically having a painted portion on it, so that's a unique item per se. And the other one, I've never seen it either, but it doesn't look anything like this. The T of the 3 comes at a lower elevation than the queen's shoulder, so it's not the same stamp. These were thought to be progressive die proofs with different treatments for the old frame, and back in those days, you can't really fault them for not seeing everything, because they were relying on people reporting things and that type of stuff, and they didn't have scanners, they didn't have ways and means of sending things around, et cetera, for proper evaluation. So they relied on these highly visible things on the side here, and they said they're progressive die proofs. But they're not. If I go to the first one, which is the one they call A there, and I compare that with the master die. So the master die basically has different slopes of lines. So they've got a downward sloping line this way and another sloping line that way. So it makes these little diamond shaped, they call them lozenges or rhombuses, and they put a dot in each one. That's the way that it was designed by Charles Skinner. If you look at this, the dots are all missing. Okay, so they've gone in and they've removed all those dots, right? And I think all they were trying to do was try to lighten the image. Right? This was felt to be too dark, right? So it lightens the image a bit. Okay? Also, I'm not 100% sure whether this is just the scan or not. You can see the nostrils and the lips and that type of thing are much darker, but the whole thing is much darker as well. So I'm not quite sure if that's been worked on or not. So if she's the next one is even more dramatic. This one, they've taken out a full set of sloping lines. So now instead of having 2 sets of lines in different directions, now they just got 1 set of lines. And wherever they've had to move that line, it causes the other one to be a dotted line. And how they remove these lines basically is that they take a caliper and retrace the image on the back, and then they hit the back with a hammer and a punch. Okay? So if you think of 3 or 4 pool table balls lined up on a pool table, if you hit the first ball with your cue ball, the first one doesn't move, the second one doesn't move, the third one doesn't move, and the fourth one goes scooting right down the rest of the table. And it's the same kind of energy transfer would be used for this removal of these of those lines. So that, you know, is a tremendous amount of changes been made on that, and I'll come back to that in a minute. I think the next slide is the next slide is the third one, and the third one is really quite easy because the die sinkage is different. If I take a look at the die itself, the actual 3-cent die, it's 50 millimeters by 62 millimeters. If I look at the sinkage of the number C die, it's 68 by 74. So it can't be progressive if the die size is actually different. And if you look at that a bit more detail, they have some very cool lines here, basically on very straight and heavy with a space between them. And that's repeated down here between the C and the E. And they've darkened up the veins on all 4 leaves. So now if you take a look at that, you take a look at a 3-cent numeral, it looks exactly the same, except they got a numeral in the corner. But the fill, the oval fill is the same. It's the same down here. It's the same at the top. The top leaves that are still there are the darkened leaves. So this one here was made specifically to try out a design, which ended up being repeated on the numeral issue. The similarity of the random marks mentioned outside the image on the 3-cent and on the A and B dies show that they were actually made from the same die. It's just that they were not made. It's just that the final die didn't originate. Those originated from the final. It would have been impossible to rework the extensive mods that were made there to get it back to the original state that you had originally, and that would have had the case because the 3-cent and the vignette images match perfectly. So I think the conclusion for me basically was that after the rolls were produced for number 1 for the 2 different plate laydowns, state 2 and state 1, that was modified at that time. Okay? And when they went to do the number C, they had to make a new die off the transfer because that was too far modified to bring it back to a state. So anyway, that's my presentation. Thank you very much for listening, and I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope that you enjoyed it. And I'll bring the panel back on so I can see who's still here. And I'm open for any questions that you might have as well. So, thank you.